For nearly half a century, the respective moons of the gas giants Saturn and Jupiter have provided extraordinary laboratories in space for testing the core tenets of the electric universe theory. In 1979, the Voyager space probe returned the first close-up images of the Jovian moon Io, revealing remarkable filamentary structures exploding hundreds of kilometers into space. Mainstream astronomers could only conclude that the filamentary plumes were produced by volcanism, even though filamentation is never seen nor hypothesized in volcanic eruptions. However, plasma scientists immediately recognized the characteristics of electrical discharge on Io. The brilliant astronomer Thomas Gold also made the same connection in a 1979 scientific paper. And in 1987, Drs. Anthony Peratt and Alex Destler published their own peer-reviewed paper in which they proved that the filamentation in Io's plumes could only be explained as a plasma discharge. A remarkably similar mystery has unfolded on the Saturnian moon Enceladus. Scientists have also observed similar filamentary features exploding from the surface of Enceladus. And again, mainstream astronomers have insisted that volcanism, in this instance a form called cryovolcanism, is the only possible explanation. However, the electric universe position has always been that, like Io, Enceladus is electromagnetically connected to its gas giant parent and the plumes it produces, which are actually composed of jets remarkably similar to those of active comets, are electrical discharges resulting from electrical oscillations between Enceladus and Saturn. Indeed, the electrical circuitry connecting Io and Enceladus to their respective gas giant parents has been acknowledged for many years by mainstream astronomers. Recently, a new scientific paper provides unprecedented insights into Enceladus's tremendous electromagnetic environment and the extraordinary electrical energies associated with the plumes. The team of scientists based at a major plasma physics laboratory in France studied 13 years' worth of data collected by the Cassini spacecraft on its mission to Saturn. They discovered the stunning revelation that the, quote, electromagnetic influence of the so-called plumes stretches for an incredible 500,000 kilometers. And equally remarkably, though not surprising at all from the electric universe perspective, they also found the, quote, systematic existence of a filamentation process. The authors state in the paper's abstract, published in the Journal of Geophysical Research, these findings demonstrate a more extensive electrodynamic coupling than previously reported for Enceladus, and more generally for any moon magnetosphere interaction. Unfortunately, the scientists still hold to the view that the so-called plumes on Enceladus are caused by cryovolcanic eruptions, and that complicated magnetofluidic processes produce the extraordinary electromagnetic effects they've observed. The reasoning is described as follows in a recent Science Alert report, which states, through cracks in its icy southern hemisphere, Enceladus erupts plumes of water vapor and dust particles. When exposed to Saturn's radiation environment, these water molecules become electrically charged, forming a plasma that interacts with the giant planet's magnetic field and sweeps past the moon. This interaction generates structures called Alfvén wings, electromagnetic waves that travel like vibrations along a plucked guitar string, following magnetic field lines connecting Enceladus to Saturn's poles. What makes this discovery remarkable is the sheer scale and complexity of the system. The primary Alfvén wing doesn't simply travel to Saturn and dissipate. Instead, it reflects back and forth between Saturn's ionosphere at the planet's poles and the donut-shaped plasma torus that encircles Enceladus's orbit. An astonishing assumption that remains unchallenged in planetary science is the notion that the filamentary, electrically charged plumes are themselves somehow not an electrical phenomenon, despite all evidence to the contrary. This point is succinctly elucidated by Stephen Smith in a 2018 Thunderbolts picture of the day, which challenges the mainstream hypothesis that the gravitational influence of Saturn is sufficient to produce cryovolcanism on Enceladus. Stephen writes, although the south pole of Enceladus is warmer than it, quote, should be, it is still 261 below 0 Celsius. So-called tidal kneading from Saturn fails because the theory has no explanation for why the effect is limited to the southern hemisphere. Indeed, prior to the arrival of the Cassini spacecraft at Saturn in 2005, astronomers expected Enceladus to be long geologically dead. The so-called volcanic activity Cassini captured was surprising enough, yet truly astonishing were the jets of material seen exploding at the moon's south pole, the last place such activity was expected. As described in a 2005 Space.com report, the finding flipped everything scientists knew about Enceladus on its head, because what should have been a dead moon appeared to be geologically active, and what was supposed to be the moon's coldest region turned out to be its warmest. Astronomer John Spencer said of the discovery, "This is as astonishing as if we'd flown past Earth and found that Antarctica was warmer than the Sahara." This latest discovery comes after earlier revelations, which began to illustrate the incredible electromagnetic energies in the Saturnian environment, and the electrical circuitry directly connecting Saturn and Enceladus. I cannot overemphasize that these revelations were not predicted by mainstream astronomers, but fit beautifully with the electric universe hypothesis that the so-called plumes on Enceladus are a form of electrical discharge. To emphasize this point, let's look more closely at the claim by planetary scientists that when electrically neutral water molecules are ejected from the moon's surface by cryovolcanic activity, UV rays from the sun, and interactions with plasma in Saturn's magnetosphere strip electrons from the water molecules, forming positively charged water ions. In theory, these ions are then free to be, quote, picked up and merge with co-rotating plasma, supposedly generating an electric current. However, let's look back at some earlier scientific discoveries, which powerfully contradict this reasoning. In 2018, a paper in the Journal of Geophysical Research presented data from the Cassini-Langmuir probe, which suggested that negatively charged dust grains had previously, quote, blocked the signal of the powerful electric currents in the Enceladus jets. Cassini scientists had estimated the strength of the jet's electric currents based on disturbances to Cassini's magnetometer instrument. But as noted in the summary of the aforementioned paper, quote, when Cassini flew through the icy plume, its instruments sent back vastly different readings. According to the craft's Langmuir probe, which measures particle density, there were enough ions present to generate a current of 10 million amps. The magnetometer indicated a current of more than 20 times weaker. The authors provide experimental evidence that ions like those in the so-called Enceladus plume are, quote, attracted and trapped within the sheaths of negatively charged dust grains. They conclude that, quote, Cassini's Langmuir probe is measuring the entire ion population, free and trapped ions, while the Cassini magnetometer detects the magnetic perturbations associated with pickup currents from the smaller population of free ions, with a distinction possibly reconciling the ongoing debate in the literature on the ion density in the plume. Now, simply put, these results are anomalous for the standard, quote, pickup ion model, but they are expected if the surface of Enceladus is being etched by electrical discharge machining, as Wall Thornhill always proposed. Electrical discharge machining works by stripping electrons from high points on a surface. In this process on Enceladus, positive ions generated on the surface are heated by electrical discharge and electrostatically attracted to follow the electrons into space. This does, in fact, explain the high loading of positive ions that the Langmuir probe measured. Let us also consider the hypothetical processes that planetary scientists must invoke to try to explain the explosive plume's generation. Given the icy cold temperatures of the moon at its vast distance, nearly 900 million miles from the sun, it seems preposterous to suggest that solar warming could produce the plumes. So it's believed that Saturn's gravitational influence produces tidal heating within the moon, creating the explosive outbursts. However, science discovery continues to challenge the tidal heating explanation, both for Enceladus as well as for the so-called volcanism on Jupiter's moon Io. In 2013, scientists reported that the locations of the so-called volcanic plumes on Io are completely incompatible with the moon's internal heat signatures. The lead author of a study on the findings stated that it, quote, can't be reconciled with any existing solid-body tidal heating models. Likewise, on Enceladus, in 2016, scientists were amazed to discover that when the so-called geysers on the moon are producing the most water and dust, the accompanying gas output was anomalously low. as reported by Space.com in 2016. The researchers expected quite a lot more gas expelled at the far part of Enceladus's orbit to help explain the outpouring of dust, but they found the gas output had bumped up by just 20%, far less than expected. The leader of the study said of the findings, "We had thought the amount of water vapor in the overall plume across the whole south polar area was being strongly affected by tidal forces from Saturn. Instead, we find that the small-scale jets are what's changing." So what we see demonstrated in the ongoing challenges that Enceladus presents to mainstream planetary science is, of course, only emblematic of the theoretical crisis at the very heart of cosmology. It's the reason why some scientists have been more eager to entertain that the, quote, mysterious comet Atlas is a kind of alien spacecraft rather than recognizing what is self-evidently true, which is that it's an electrically discharging body. But given the overall deplorable condition of the institutions that have come to dominate our civilization, it would be the height of naivete to expect anything better from institutionalized science at this point in human history. However, I do take some solace in one of the most salient observations from Thomas Kuhn in his seminal work, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. He states, "Truth emerges more readily from error than from confusion. Little confusion can exist as to the nature of the fundamental error in the space sciences, the near total exclusion of the predominant electromagnetic force at all scales in the cosmos."